Again, I'll be uploading Adhar's deck as well as the recording from today to that folder that I shared with you guys. Well, into the different folders, and then from the main folder that I shared with you guys late last week and yesterday. So in case you want to go back and reference anything, it will be available for you.
And Kieran, I can send you an updated one. I made some tweaks last night, so I can send you an updated
I
one.
figured you might. So I have not updated it yet. So that's perfect. Yeah, if you can send that to me, I can get that uploaded. Okay, I think we're just missing the Mana Electric team.
And do the teams all know each other, or would it be worthwhile to go through a quick round of introduction?
No, so yesterday we kicked things off and did introductions. So everyone sort of met everyone yesterday. Two of the teams actually knew each other from when they both first launched their companies, which was super interesting. It's both solar companies, so it makes sense that they knew of each other. Okay, there's Fabrice coming in. Okay, so thank you guys, or everyone, I should say. I shouldn't say guys anymore. Thank you all for joining us this morning, afternoon, evening for you guys. We have Adhar here. Adhar is a product management and product marketing executive. He has 18 years of experience in the industry, leading and building growing digital products, executing go-to-market strategies, and expanding global markets. He's currently consulting with Starbucks in their conversational AI voice UX platform, but super excited to have him here. He'll go through a more product market fit and specifically product market fit and how it applies to the US for you guys today. We really want this to be very interactive. So if you have questions, please take yourself off mute, ask questions along the way. This should not be, you know, professor student lecture style. We really want this to be as interactive as possible. Excuse me, as possible. I'm going to drink coffee while Adhar starts talking so that I stop going over my own words. But Adhar, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Kieran. It's my pleasure to be here today and talk about the product market fit. I've been in the product field for about 18 years and made a few mistakes along the way. You know, launched products for startups, big companies, took products to 60 plus countries. And today I want to share my learnings and how I've started to think about building products and finding the product market fit. And I'm hoping some of this would be applicable to you all, depending on, you know, no matter where you are in your product market fit journey. It could be, you know, very early on, and I know some of you already have products and looking to expand, but I hope this would be helpful in your product journey. So before we get started, real quick, if we can maybe just do like a 10-second intro, your name, your company, and where you are in your product market fit journey. I think that would really help me just understand, you know, each one of you, you know, context here. So can we go around the table and have a quick introduction?
Let's go alphabetically backwards today. Matthias, do you mind if you want to jump in?
Sure thing. What we do is neurocognitive digital evaluations and digital biomarkers to early detect Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. And we are product ready and launching into market.
Perfect. Christoph, Solar Clino.
Good afternoon. So we at Solar Clino, we manufacture robots. The products are ready. We already have 2 products on the market and 2 more to come because we go towards automation, mostly in Europe, but we start selling overseas, mostly Southeast Asia, and hopefully in the US a little bit more successfully in the coming months.
Awesome. Fabrice or Joost from Mana Electric?
Yeah, Joost here from Mana. Sorry, let me get my video. Yeah, in terms of what we do, we produce solar panels using only desert sand and electricity as inputs. And we do this using in situ resource utilization technologies, which are originally derived from the space industry. We are in our R&D phase, so we have not launched our product yet. And we are mainly in the discussions with customers and have some semi-confirmed customers, let's say. So in that sense, we're still before launching our product.
Thank you. Callum, One Privacy?
Yes, so I'm Callum from One Privacy. We do end-to-end encryption. So we do end-to-end encrypted communication, collaboration in cloud. We're relatively far along as well. We have paying clients in Luxembourg and in France, but nothing at all in the US. So hopefully you can learn something for this in particular.
Excellent. Last but not least, Ashwini, Asset Flex.
Yeah, hi. So we are doing a cloud product to cater to the oil and gas market, where we are bringing an end-to-end interdisciplinary product all into one as a one-plug solution for the engineering market, and one of the verticals being oil and gas and then petrochemical and so forth. Where we are in the journey is engineering has been there for last 20 years. So breaking the change management and telling the engineers to do a completely radically different way is where we are. We are almost there, we think, in terms of getting for large corporations take on to our products and start using it. That's exactly where we are right now. Thanks.
Okay, so that was it?
That's everyone.
Okay, that's great. So I think, I mean, it's great to know. It looks like some of you are early on in your journey building product and starting to get your first customers. Some of you are ready for expansion. So I think no matter where you are, this overview and this framework would be applicable to most of you. So let's jump right in. So according to statistics, 90% of startups fail within first year. And of the remaining, just over 50% of businesses do not make it to their fifth year, right? That's a huge percentage of failures in the startup community. Now let's look at why startups fail, why companies fail, and how do you increase your odds of success as you go along your journey. So top challenges at a startup company, it's really related to three main areas at the very early stage. It's about having the right product, starting with a great idea, building the right product that customers and the market would desire and pay for. The second big thing is having the right set of team, hiring and building a world-class team that can go through the rigor of the startup, that can build the right product, that can go along the journey as you grow your startup. And then the last thing is finding the right market to sell your product. All three are very critical, but let's maybe go around the table. What do you guys, what do you all think? Which one is the most important in a startup journey? Any thoughts? I want this to be interactive, so let's let's all jump in and.
I think you are right. These are the three ones. I would say that there is probably a third element, which is the time to market. And this is most of the time underestimated by most of the startups, but I think time to market is key, in my opinion.
Yep, great. So yeah, so I think if you think about all three, right? All three are really critical, and let's start with team, right? So most of the startups, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of founding members, they really emphasize on the right team. And team is really important because you have to have the right team to execute on your vision, your idea, your product, right? And a smart team, a great team can execute very well and create great products to sell. So the team is really important. Similarly, a product, right? Product can be defined as how impressive your product is for the customer who actually uses it. And it's really important because without a great product, you have nothing to sell. But the size of the market and the growth rate of the market, the growth rate of the customers in this market, I think according to me, that is really the most important out of all three. Because if you have a great product and if you have a great team, but there is no market to buy your product, then no matter how good your product is, it wouldn't work. If you have a good market, if you have a huge market that is growing, that has potential, then you can find the right team. You can hire the right team to build the product. And even if you don't have the best product in the world, even if your product isn't great, it can still survive. The good market can pull the product out of the company. And your product doesn't have to be great in the first few iterations. It basically usually has to work, right? And the market doesn't care how good your product is. As long as your team can produce a product that is viable, that is something that market desires, it can work. Whereas no matter how good your product is or your team is, if you don't have a market, if you're going after a market that is, doesn't exist or very small or not growing, then you have a problem. Right? Eventually, your product will stop selling, your team is going to get demoralized, they'll quit, and your startup will fail. So it's really important to have the right market and the right go-to-market strategy. How do you find the right market and how do you go about it? That is really the product market fit. So here's one quote from Tara Hunt, who is a pioneer in online marketing and a respected authority in online community. According to her, the key to winning for a startup is find your product market fit before you run out of money. That is all. That is all that really matters. If you cannot get to the product market fit, you're done. But if you're able to find your product market fit, then you have some time, you get some buffer, you have some iterations before you can improve your product and get your product to an ideal situation. It might not be the best right away, but you have some time to really get there. So it's really important to start thinking about it and find your product market fit very early on. Here's another quote from Mark Andreessen, who thinks that the only thing that matters for a startup is getting to product market fit. Right? So now that we know product market fit is really critical and companies need to actively think about it, let's see what it actually is. So again, here's another definition from Mark Andreessen. He's a famous venture capitalist, in case you don't know about him. And he's the one who initially coined the term product market fit, I think back in 2007 or early 2000s. So according to him, being in a good market that has a lot of demand, it has a lot of customers with unmet needs, market that is growing, right? So being in that good market, successfully identifying that market, identifying the target customer, and then selling them the right product, quality product that resonates with the market. Now, the market could be a vertical, it could be a particular demographic or particular segment of users, or for companies that are looking to expand internationally, it could be another country or a region, right? And quality of the startup's product can be defined as how impressive the product is to the end user, end customer, or the end market you're trying to sell it to, users who are actually going to use it. How easy is the product to use? How feature rich it is? How fast is it? How many bugs does it have? How extensible is it? Right? How polished is it? So all those things really form your end product. And really, when you have the right market and the right product and you merge those two, the combination, that is really product market fit. So how do you get there? Right? So typically when we build products, they fall under three different kind of buckets, and they meet one of these three criteria for a company to launch a product. So first one is desirable. You need to check the desirability. Do customers want what you're going to build? Who is desperate for it and who is going to pay for it? Right? The second one is feasible. Yes, customers want it, but is it feasible for you to build a product based on your knowledge, your capabilities, your technical know-how? How feasible is it for you to build it? And the third part is, yes, you can build it and customers want it, but can you make money selling it? What is the business model that you have that you're going to use to deliver the product to the market? And once you have that trifecta, that a product that you're building is desirable by the market, it's technically feasible, and you can make money, it's viable for your business, that's when you really have your product market fit. And a lot of companies start with one of these three areas. They have an idea that they think they can build that's feasible, and then they go and find the desirability and viability. Or they might have a need in the market, they might have a problem that they've identified, and they start with desirability, and then they go and figure out the feasibility part, whether it's feasible and whether you can scale it and build it. And a lot of companies start with viability. So different companies start their journey in one of these three areas and then eventually go and find the other two. And once you have the other two, that's when you really start to scale and grow and monetize and really find your product market fit. And by the way, feel free to stop anytime if you have questions. I don't know if there's a way to raise hand or just speak up, but definitely, let's keep it informal. So so 6 steps to product market fit. How do you start thinking about product market fit? Right. Step 1, always start with your target customer. Do your market research. I think I'm sure a lot of you have already done your research when you're starting with one of those 3 areas that I showed on the previous slide. You're searching for the customer problem, you're searching for product feasibility, a lot of those early research. But when it comes to your introducing your product to the market, do a very thorough research about your market and your customers. Find out who is your target customer, segment the market to understand different personas, different targets, different types of users. And really, you're trying to find out, go as detailed as possible to find out exactly who is the customer. You're trying to answer who, and find out who is the customer who has a pain point that you're trying to solve and who would be willing to pay for your product or service. And you're trying to define a high-level hypothesis that you're going to test by introducing your product to market. And this step is really important because you cannot satisfy everybody in your market. No matter what product you have, no matter what service you have, it is just impossible to satisfy every customer that you think would need this product. And so even if you haven't narrowed it down yet, start with the assumption of who you think your target customer is, right? If you have a particular vertical, if you have a particular demographic, start with where you think your customer is, and then refine as you go along. And again, it's really important to narrow the market. It's not enough to say 18 to 35-year-old or HR departments of different companies. Figure out who that one person is who really feels the pain, or who is going to use your product and whose needs you are basically addressing. Right? So maybe let's take a quick minute or two. Let's think about, in each of your areas, let's think about who are your target customers. What are the different segments and sub-segments? Maybe you've already thought about it. Maybe you're already addressing one or more of these segments. But maybe let's take a minute. Let's think about who your customers are, who are the potential segments, and maybe start with 3. And then if you already have it, let's talk about maybe one industry vertical, one function, or one use case that you're going after. So maybe let's take a minute, and then we'll come back and we'll see if we can, some of you can share what market or what segment are your potential customers in. And if you're ready, you can share now. You don't have to wait.
Okay, I'd like to share from Assets Lux. Our target customers are engineers. Basically, the EPC companies, engineering, procurement, and construction, who basically provide engineering for any kind of technologies, right, in different verticals. What are the potential customer segments when you say that?
So potential customer segments. So it's basically when you say engineers in all across all verticals. when you define segments, you maybe narrow it down one level further, right? Engineers in IT industry might have very different needs and pain points and requirements from engineers in manufacturing industry, for example, right? So are there segments within your engineering category that that might be that might be a better customer or have a better propensity to pay for your product?
Yeah, sure. So interdisciplinary customer segments. So within EPC sectors, you have structural engineers, piping engineers, mechanical engineers. That becomes a customer segment, which we would certainly want to address too via our cloud solutions. And what segments are you passionate about helping is because this is the problem that in the interdisciplinary engineering activity, who all contribute to getting the plant engineered, there is a lot of human intervention and there is less digital connectivity that results into delayed engineering cycles. So we basically give one single product that
Right.
essentially combines all these interdisciplines together to address that and shorten the engineering time cycle by 40% is what we target.
Okay,
Thank
that's
you.
great. So I think it's great that you've defined engineering you're going after engineering customers, engineering professionals. It's also again, like I mentioned, and like you said, engineering could be, there are different fields of engineering. There could be different branches, different types of engineers, or different types of companies they work for, different verticals. It would help to narrow it down so that you can find some focus and go after maybe one vertical, right? Go after manufacturing or go after IT or go after, mechanical, if it makes sense for your business, right? But think about narrowing it down to, you've already narrowed it down to one function, maybe one vertical or one use case, right? What is, if there are, I could imagine different engineers and different verticals have different problems. So identify going one level down and identifying one vertical or one use case that you want to go after, right? Anybody else wants to share what you think your target customer or segment is?
I could speak a little bit about it. I'm
Sure.
Matthias from ViewMind. We're the health tech company for the early detection of Alzheimer's and other dementias. And our main focus right now is kind of divided. It doesn't sound as efficient as it should be, but it's divided between pharmaceutical companies, neuropsychiatrists and specialists, and general physicians, right? So we need to go to the pharmaceutical companies because they are developing the drugs that will cure the diseases we are targeting. And working with them gives us a lot of recognition. So you're immediately recognized just by working with the pharma. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a must to work with them.
Yeah.
Our main goal is to go to the general physicians so they can do like a wide screening of the population in order to know who is going to develop something in the early stages and then target it with some drug of a pharmaceutical company. But there is no general physician that would be willing to use a neurocognitive evaluation that has not been validated by the key opinion leaders who are the specialists in the field. So that's why the first step for us is, after we finally started working with the pharmaceutical companies, is to go to the key opinion leaders. So I think even though our main target is to go to the GPs, we do have to make quite a path to get there. Right now we're in the second stage of it, going to the key opinion leaders. Do you think that makes sense from a strategic point of view?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, it does make sense. So it looks like, do you need to go to insurance companies to, the pharmaceutical companies to get, when you say recognition, is it to get approvals, or what do you mean by recognition? What is their role in the process?
So it's not the same thing if you say that you're a startup that's quantifying cognitive performance and detecting the early stages of Alzheimer's, than if you say that you're a startup or a company that's working with Novartis or Biogen or someone in the development of a new drug, and that these pharmaceutical companies that spend billions of dollars developing the drug are using your tool in order to early detect subjects to test this new drug.
Right.
So just by working with them, you're automatically kind of pre-approved, and a lot of doors open. So that's
you
the
get
reason
validation. You get validation of having a big partner and big companies working with you. So I think that totally makes sense. looks like your target customer in this case is actual physicians, and your go-to-market is through the insurance, the pharmaceutical companies, right? That's your go-to-market strategy. You're going to market and reaching, eventually your goal is to reach the end customer, target customer, which is these doctors and physicians who are prescribing the medicines, and you're using pharmaceutical companies as a potential go-to-market. Yeah. So
Yes,
that
absolutely.
right. So that totally makes sense. And I think, again, I really, highly encourage you all to think about your target customer as, imagine one person or a persona who is going to use your product. So in your case, for example, it could be a doctor who is a primary care physician who is going to use your medicine and prescribe it to a patient who has Alzheimer's, right? That doctor or whoever is making that decision in that hospital, maybe it's a person who buys medicines, or maybe it's a person, right, who's really looking into working with pharmaceutical companies. That one person is your target customer. Right.
Perfect. That's exactly what we did. We did the patient's journey in a really detailed kind of way, and then see where we could change the way that things were
Yeah,
being
actually,
done.
in your case, I would also think about your target customer is actually the patient, and even the doctors are your go-to-market. So your go-to-market is the insurance, the pharmaceutical companies, and then your physicians to go to the actual end customer, patient, who is your target customer, right? So that's also another way to think about it. These people are your go-to-market, and the segments you're really trying to help is the doctors, but then eventually these patients. Right.
Yes, perfect.
Right. So it's really important to identify that target customer segment, and you might start with like in Ashwini's case, right, with multiple all verticals, engineering across all verticals, or in different companies, you might start broader. But then what happens is if you try to go after that broader segment, you will find that you'll burn out. You don't have the right resources, enough resources and time and money to go after a broader set. So the more narrow you can go and define your target segment, the more effectively you'll be able to customize your product, tailor your product and your messaging, which we'll see in further slides. The easier it'll become for you to quickly validate and go after that segment, right? So once you've identified your target customer and you know who is going to use your product, next step to finding product market fit is to find out what is the pain point that customer is experiencing. Why do they need your product? And again, as you can see, if you have too broad of a target market, then your why becomes more unclear, because different customers in different markets, different verticals, maybe even in different countries. If you're trying to expand to different countries, your customers in US might be very different from, let's say, if you want to expand into other countries in Europe. So that's the reason you need to find out who the customer is. And then next step is, why do they need your product? You want to address the customer needs that are not adequately met with current products. And because the customers are going to compare your product, the alternatives, and the relative degree to which your product meets their needs, right? So that would depend on your competitive landscape. So what you want to do next is, after you've identified your customer segment or your target customer, you want to talk to as many people, as many users in those segments to find out what kind of problems they are facing, what kind of problems create biggest market opportunity and propensity for these customers to pay you. And it's totally fine to start with maybe 3 segments. Should we go after pharmaceutical companies, or should we go after insurance companies, or whatever the case may be? And then narrow it down as you talk to these people. Do one-on-one interviews. Talk to them about their current workflows. How do they accomplish different tasks? What pain points do they have? Do surveys about your product or your competitor product. Find out the gaps and the areas that you can address. Go and observe them in their workplace. Find out what their experience is. do a co-planning workshop where you go and sit with them and ask them questions, and include them in your product development process, and find out what is it that you can build that will help them solve their pain points. So really, it's important to think about those pain points and then identify which are the ones. You might find that there are multiple segments that could use your product, or even within one customer segment, one vertical, there could be multiple pain points. Then you want to identify which ones have the biggest market opportunity for you, right? Which ones are more important for customer, or which ones can be, if you already have a product, which ones can already be met with your product, right? If you're trying to expand to US, for example, you don't want to massively change your product, but really identify the pain points. If the market is different, you want to identify the pain points or gaps that is addressed by your product compared to other competitors in that market or region. And what's really important here is to dig deeper into the problem. For example, how do I reduce my commute time to work, as opposed to I want a faster car, right? If a customer is asking for a faster car, that doesn't necessarily mean they want a faster car. Maybe they mean that they need a car sharing service, or they need, the problem that needs to be solved is maybe reducing congestion. So go dig deeper, talk to a lot of these customers, and find out how you can understand their problem and solve their problem, right? Another example is, I want to convert more leads into sales, as opposed to I want a better CRM software, right? So going that level and digging deeper and really understanding their problems, not their solutions, would help you would help you identify which opportunities, which markets do you want to go after. And there are frameworks that you can use to do this. There are frameworks like jobs to be done, which is really identifying what jobs that your customers are trying to accomplish. There's also frameworks like empathy map to understand their pain points. So some of these frameworks could be helpful in identifying user sentiments and their emotions, and what actions they're taking, what pain points they're feeling. But it's really important to do that. So maybe let's take another minute and think about 2 or 3 demographics, 2 or 3 segments that we've identified for our products, and think about, maybe write at least 3 pain points that your customers are facing, and which ones of those pain points present the greatest opportunity for you to solve with your product, and also which ones have the highest propensity to pay for it. Let's see if you can identify maybe 3 pain points and at least one that you can solve, or you're already solving with your product.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in. Joost from Mana here. We do the solar panel production. If it's all right with you, I'll answer this for the US market, because it's also a good exercise for us. And obviously it's based on some assumptions, and that's why we are here to understand if it's correct or not. But one of the pain points we see is, obviously there is a push towards renewable energy, and it's mainly because we have to do something about the emissions that are going on. But also in the energy industry, cost is king. The price at which you produce power in the end decides what energy source you are using, because energy is a quite standard good. In the end, your light bulb doesn't act differently if it's coming from a coal power plant or from a solar panel. But what our assumption, I would say, for the US is that in at least providing power in a renewable fashion, there is a big pain point that most of the renewable energy sources, like solar panels, are produced today outside of the US. And if they are not produced, if they are produced locally, they are often too expensive. And that's what we are trying to solve, because we can produce locally using our machines, locally in a desert region, and we can do so at a cost that is competitive to, for example, Chinese manufacturers. And then finally, we do so in an even more clean fashion than the way the solar panels are produced now. So I hope that answers it.
Okay, so you said these solar panels are, let's go with the biggest pain points, right? So you said the pain points are emissions and cost.
Yes. And local production.
Local production.
Yeah. So made in America. I know it might be a huge assumption I'm making here that is important, but that's what I'm here to explore as well, let's say.
Yeah, and so how did you identify these pain points?
Yeah, I mean, we talked to, at least in the European and Middle Eastern markets, we've talked to quite some people, and actually what we initially thought was that cost was the big pain point.
Yeah.
Which is true, to be honest. Cost is the big pain point in the energy market. But we didn't realize that local production was actually very interesting for customers, even in Middle East or Europe, where, let's say, nationalism plays less of a role as the US. And again, this is maybe me making assumptions.
Yeah.
But we noticed that local production was actually important for them because for certain energy tenders, there's certain quotas of how much of the cost has to come from local suppliers. Also, in some of these activities, they have big issues that if they are shipping it from China, and for example, a batch of solar panels is not functioning properly, then the EPC contractor might not be able to deliver the contract on time, and they incur all kinds of additional costs because of that. Because the new batch needs to be provided by the supplier. Whilst if you can produce locally on site, and if a batch is not working, you can just turn on the production, let's say, and continue.
Yeah, so I think that's a great example. So if you think about solar panels, I mean, it looks like you've done your research in Middle East, some other countries. I don't know if you've done in US, but I would also talk to customers in US, right? If you're trying to enter the US market, most likely, a lot of times pain points are the same, needs are the same, but it could be different also, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about this, but you want to talk to customers in your target market. And looks like in your case, if you're buying solar panel, the pain points that customers might be facing is, like you said, emissions and cost, and maybe there are regulatory challenges to import solar panels or the producing it locally. Maybe other pain points could be maintenance, how well you can maintain them, and I'm thinking about, like, if I were a solar panel customer, these are the things I would be thinking about, right? Maybe quality of solar panels, how long they last, how well they their power, their conversion. Maybe installation, right? So all of those are pain points that I, as a customer, have when it comes to solar panel. And maybe out of those pain points, the quality, the maintenance, the local production, the emissions, the cost, maybe out of those, I would really pay extra for, well, I wouldn't pay extra for cost. I was going to say cost, but I'd really buy your product because it's cheaper, right? I might not necessarily switch because it's produced local. Maybe I can bear the pain and import it if it's still cost effective. Maybe cost is something I would, I really, that is a real pain point, and I'll pay if you're giving me cheaper. Or maybe I'm really, passionate about saving environment and the emissions and the carbon footprint, and maybe I'll pay a little bit extra and buy your product because it has low emissions, right? So that's why I think it's really important to identify out of like what are all these pain points and which ones would be which ones you solve with your product, and which ones I would be willing to pay for when I buy your product. Because I might not pay extra for example, let's say maybe I want solar panel to save money, and I might not be willing to pay extra if it reduces emissions. I don't care as much about emissions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So having that prioritized list of pain points would help you identify which ones you want to highlight when we talk about the next step, which is value proposition. And again, going after a different market like US, you want to challenge your assumptions. You want to make sure you validate your assumptions by talking to your end customers in that market or that region, because those assumptions and propensity to pay and how you think about these things could be very different culturally and economically. Right. So again, talk to a lot of customers in your target market. The more personal, the better. One-on-one interviews, surveys, and all those phases. And once you have identified what customers you're going after, and then what are the pain points that they have, which pain point you want to prioritize and solve, then it comes down to why should they use your product, or how does your product or service solve that pain point and solves it enough for them to pay for your product. Right? So based on the pain points that you identify, there will be certain features that are going to be must-haves, which everybody has it, right? Competitors offer it. Those are table stakes. You have to offer them in your product. But then there are other features that might help you build your competitive advantage. And really, this is where the product part comes in. You're trying to figure out, how do you stand out from competitors? How do you win in the market based on everything that you've learned about the customer and their needs? How do you make your product fit into that mold? And how do you convey your value proposition, right? A lot of your go-to-market, how do you, what value do you propose, and how do you really convey to the customer that your product is the best product for them to buy, right? So typically, a value proposition looks something like this, right? I want to serve health-conscious millennials by solving how to stay fit problem. So you see, the customer segment is very, very focused. It's not health-conscious people. It's not millennials. It's health-conscious millennials. So we've narrowed it down, and they could have multiple problems, right? They could have their needs could be related to fitness. Their needs could be related to staying healthy, a lot of other needs. And we've decided to focus on how to stay fit. We're solving one problem for one particular segment. Right. Another example is, I want to serve manufacturing companies by solving production waste problem by offering a computer vision-based workflow analysis solution. So again, you're taking one industry, manufacturing companies here, they could have many problems, but you decide to focus on production waste, which is very, very specific problem, and a lot of manufacturing companies would be willing to pay for it, right? And how you're doing it by offering a superior solution that does workflow analysis based on computer vision. So that's the level of thought and focus that is going to be helpful as you go, especially if you're in the early stages of product or early stages of getting into US or other markets. Because otherwise, if I were to target, if I have a computer vision based solution, there could be numerous industries I could go after. There could be numerous problems I could solve, but I don't have resources as a startup. So I start with one industry, one vertical, one problem, right? And then I create my value proposition that defines what problem you're solving and who and what is your competitive advantage. So again, once you have that value proposition, you start with the minimal set of features that solves that particular pain point that you identified. And the goal here is, in your product, to build the smallest set of features to reach that value proposition. And this is again why it's important, because if you have a broad segment, then you will end up having, you'll basically have to build a lot of features in your product to satisfy different needs of these different customers, right? You're building for emissions in your solar panels, you're building for cost, you're building for local production. Maybe it's easy, maybe it's, you've already done it, but maybe it's difficult, and you need to choose which ones you're going after, and having that right segment and right pain point helps here. And you're trying to build the smallest set of features to reach your value proposition. In the early days of product, don't focus on making it robust. Find the product market fit first, and then harden the product. It doesn't have to be the best product. It basically has to work. And what you'll find is sometimes you find your initial product market fit in your home country. And if you're trying to, once you try to expand to other countries, if you have minimal set of features, a minimum product, viable product, it may be easier to adapt and change that product if the needs of the other country, the expansion you're trying to do, if the needs are different, you can easily change it. Versus if you put in a lot of features and build a solid, strong product, it might be difficult to change that product if you need to evolve it for a different market. So you start with your minimum viable product, you build a prototype, you build an early version of the either prototype or product or whatever version you have, but try to get to market as soon as possible, right? Check on the tech feasibility. Start from there. Check the tech feasibility, check the desirability and usability. And you do this by putting your product out there, talking to a lot of potential customers, like we talked about in second step. Give your customers, your potential customers, your product to use. It could be free, it could be some minimal charge, doesn't matter, but get it out there as soon as possible and get feedback, right? There are ways to even simulate a product experience. For some of you who don't have the product or who are working on building the product, you can even get feedback early on by simulating the user experience of the final product. There are wireframing tools or prototype tools. If you're trying to see if there is interest in your product from US market, for example, with the right tools like InVision or Zapier or other tools, it's very easy to even build a shell website, create a prototype, and see how much traffic, buy some traffic from US markets, see how much traffic you get on your website. Try out different value propositions. Try out different versions of your product and highlight different features and target those customers. See if it even sticks, right? And for hardware products, work-alike, look-alike versions are also great ways to test your prototype before you have your final product ready. So getting that early feedback, you're trying to incorporate user input into your product development so you don't go down the path of spending a lot of resources on building that great product that nobody wants or in a market which is not growing, right? So this is a framework from Dan Olson, who's author of Lean Product book, I think. And basically, what he defines as minimum viable product is don't build a product that is fully functional but compromises on delightfulness, usefulness, or reliableness, right? As a user, I wouldn't buy a product that has all the bells and whistles, that does everything, but is not usable or is not reliable. I want to buy a product or create a product that has part of the functionality, but make that functionality robust, make it reliable and usable and delightful for the user, and then put it out there in the market, and then slowly add more functionality. So once you have your initial product ready, again, start talking to customers as early as possible to get a read on valuable and usable part. And very early on, it could be directional. It doesn't have to be very specific quantitative. It can be directional read. So you know you are heading in the right direction and keep investing in that direction, right? And you can do one-on-one meetings. You can do passive observations, go and see how they're using your product, how their workflows are. You can do qualitative interviews, ask them questions. App telemetry, collect, find out the bounce rates or time spent on your site. How interested are they in even, purchasing your product or looking at your website that talks about the product? How many return users and purchases you have? What is the funnel data? So you can collect all kinds of app data, but there's nothing like going and talking to customers and collecting that feedback firsthand. And once you have that feedback, you analyze that feedback, you compile your learnings, and then based on that, you make improvements and go back to previous steps. It might not happen the first time. In fact, most of the companies, it does not happen the first time. It's okay to go back multiple times and take that feedback in, tweak your product or tweak your value proposition or tweak your market, whichever the case may be, and then go back and test it again until you find the right market for your product. This is especially true if you're trying to expand to other markets where you don't have a ground presence. You don't want to build huge operations in US or other markets without really, before you test the problem hypothesis and customer validation and your value proposition. So go through all of that even before you have the product and operations in a different country. And sometimes if your product market fit is not achieved after a few iterations, then you might need to pivot. Change one or more of your major hypotheses. Either change your customer segment. Maybe I really thought this is, this is for mechanical engineers, but maybe they have the problem, but they don't want to pay. So maybe go after a different segment, or maybe create your value proposition around different needs, right? And how do you know if you have achieved product market fit? So there are a lot of companies who think they have product market fit, but they actually don't. And very early on, you're working on, you build the product, you build certain set of features, and you have some traction. And then after the initial traction, you start working on your monetization. And a lot of these companies, they get stuck in this blue line where they have some incremental growth, some monetization, but they never see this hockey stick growth. And this is really what you're looking for. And this is only possible when your product grows exponentially with no marketing. You have a huge word of mouth, you're delighted customers, you're increasing market share, and things are, market is pulling the product out of you as opposed to you really going and actively selling the product and pushing it. Once you have that, that's when you know that you've got your product market fit. And then beyond that point, it's all about scaling and expansion and growth. But you need to hit that point where the market is pulling the product out of you. And typically what it looks like when you have the product market fit for a consumer product, you're seeing hundreds of signups daily, you're seeing customers coming back, using your product daily and monthly, high retention, high engagement, you'll know it. Similarly, for enterprise product, you're seeing a lot of repeat purchases, 80 to 100% customers coming back asking for more. You have more inbound inquiries than you can handle. Your customer service team is busy. You need to hire more people. You're increasing your market share. All of those metrics are signals that you have the product market fit now. And now you're ready for expansion and growth and scaling your product or getting into a new market, right? So specifically about international expansion, once you have that product market fit in your own country and you see those, you see your product flying off the shelves, you go through the same process for international expansion. The first thing to think about is there market readiness? Is there a market for your product in a different country? And is it big enough? Can they pay for the product? Right? Is your product ready based on the current features? You don't want to tweak it too much. You don't want to completely change your product, maybe make minor adjustments. Based on the market needs of that market, of that user segment, is your product ready to go into that market? And what are the business drivers? So international expansions can be tricky. You have a limited pool of resources, and you need to decide which markets you go after, whether it's US or Middle East or expand in Europe or emerging markets. Those are all very, very different. Typically, what you should do is identify the markets where you're already getting a lot of traffic. If the customers are coming in, maybe 20 to 25% of traffic is already coming in from certain countries, that's a good indication that you need to start maybe thinking about expansion into that country. You have to go through basically the same exercise that you go through to achieve product market fit in your own country, to go and find the customers who are going to use your product, find the pain points, and then really talk to customers in that particular market. And choose the market where you will have a high degree of success. US is a huge market, and a lot of companies want to launch in US because of the market size, total addressable market, but that might not be the right market fit for every company. So some considerations when you're thinking about whether to expand in US or other parts of the world. Each country is different, and the value proposition that you want to launch in that country would be different, right? Your sales channel, maybe your go-to-market strategy would be different. All of this would vary depending on the market, but also the competition, the alternatives available, the pain points in that market. So really figure out all of those things and ask your customers. Usually the markets that are easiest to launch are the markets that are closest in cultures and languages and user behaviors to your current market. And in order to understand those markets and identify potential markets, you need to do all that analysis, identify those needs, and deliver the best product. You will have some gaps. You will need to tweak some products, but those tweaks should be more like user flow changes or some design changes, some touch point changes. It's very, very hard to introduce a new product and manage a completely new product line for one particular country. If you have that problem, maybe you're not ready to get into that country. Right? Changing the value proposition. Maybe you need to have a different messaging or channels or marketing tactics, maybe different pricing. Those things are easy to change. So go into the markets where you have cultural and economic alignment, where you can easily tweak your messaging and products and product gaps and go in that market and fulfill the needs, right? And there are a lot of tools out there that will help you do the market research. There are services like user testing, which would allow you to do online testing. There are services like Mechanical Turf. A lot of companies would help you, set up operations on the ground and do some initial research before you set up your expansive operations. So take advantage of those, do your research, and then think about expanding into the right market, right? So let's do maybe a quick exercise here. I know some of you are at least looking to expand into other markets. So let's maybe, if you want to share like which countries are economically and culturally similar to yours, and then which countries maybe you're already seeing some traffic or inquiries from. And if you've thought about their needs and propensity to pay. Anybody wants to share how you're thinking about go-to-market in international countries, or what factors you've considered?
Hi, I can jump in there. So at the moment, we've been focused on Luxembourg really. So most of our clients are based in Luxembourg. The logical next step for us is France, because we're a predominantly French-speaking team, and we have some staff members there. So in France, things are moving along in France, and then I think the third market for us is perhaps going to be the US. We've had interest from the US, people inquiring and some interest, but because of what we do, there are regulatory and legal things that we need to work out in the US before we can really respond positively to the inquiries we're getting.
Yep. So yeah, that's a great approach. So France, I don't know much about France and Luxembourg, like how close they are, but I would imagine they're probably similar to your home country, and maybe easier to expand there. And then, like you said, you're already getting queries from US customers coming in and asking for your product. So that is always an indication. If you have 20 to 30% of traffic coming in, that's always an indication that maybe it's a good time to start thinking about that market, right? But as you go, talk to a lot of customers in those markets, find out if your assumptions that you made in your home market or France market, are those assumptions still valid, or you need to change those assumptions, right? Anybody else?
Christoph speaking from Solar Clino. So because we serve solar panel maintenance teams, we look for the markets which have the biggest growth in terms of solar installations. And in this regard, Middle East and US seems in the coming years to be growing relatively fast. So this is how we came up to address a little bit more the US markets. especially because our presence also in Europe is already relatively important. We need to seek for a second wave of growth, I would say, and the North American market could be hopefully this new markets.
Yeah. I think that's great. So one caveat, a lot of companies end up expanding too fast, too much. Even big companies like Starbucks, for example, they wanted to expand into Australia, and they opened a bunch of stores without before they customized their product. In this case, coffee. Australians are big coffee lovers, but they have their peculiar taste. And Starbucks expanded too fast, and they had to scale down because Australians did not like their coffee. So now they only have select stores in a few big cities in Australia. Companies like Groupon, Airbnb, a lot of these companies expanded too fast because they thought they were ready. So be very careful when you expand. Groupon actually closed down. It went down because they expanded too fast and they could never recover from that. So be very careful and go through this exercise when you're trying to expand to international markets. And again, I know we're a minute over, but really just to recap, you start with your product or your hypothesis. You identify your target market or your target country. You identify customer needs and customer behaviors to see what are the pain points that you want to solve. Build your prototype, your actual product with minimal set of features. Tweak your product if you have to. Get it out there as soon as possible. Test it on actual customers. You analyze the results, and then use that data, use that feedback to change your hypothesis or tweak your product or maybe tweak your market, and then go around this cycle to test your new product again until you see that hockey stick growth and you see pull for your product from the market. And that's when you know you hit the product market fit. And once you're there, you're ready to go to the next phase to scale your product, grow your teams, and hit a home run. So thank you. That was all. Thank you all of you for giving me a chance, and thank you, Kirin, for giving me a chance to present my thoughts. I hope this was helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Just for the teams, as a reminder, the rest of the week you guys will be working with your advisors. So we'll see you guys as a group back on Monday. But Adhar, thank you again so much. As soon as I get the recording, I'll be uploading it to that drive as well as the presentation deck so that if you guys want to go back to reference anything, you'll definitely have it. But feel free to email me if you have any questions. But enjoy the rest of your week. I hope the sessions with your advisors are helpful this week. I'm sure they will be. And we'll see you guys on Monday.
Can I ask a really quick question?
Yes, absolutely.
That's great. I have a huge wasp flying around me right now. But I hope I don't get it. So the thing is, we do have a product that's like kind of an MVP. But each country we go, we need to approve the regulatory process, right? So we need the FDA approval, the CE mark. In Latin America, we have a bunch of them. So the thing is, we cannot go and change our product every time we go into a new market to fit the specific needs of that market. So what we actually do right now, and I wanted to check with you if this is all right, we have one product that it's fairly standard. It does a lot of things, but what we do is we communicate to specific countries. Like, okay, in Latin America, we focus on lowering the costs. In Europe, perhaps that they are more forward thinking. We say that we work on early detection, so you can treat it and it will be cheaper in the long run. In the United States, we're testing the market and seeing what's the proper way to communicate it, but the product is always the same because it would be a huge pain to change a product that has to go through regulatory processes. Do you think that's a correct way of approaching it? Is changing the story instead of the product? What would you think would be the proper way to approach it?
And this is the Alzheimer product, right?
Yes, the medical one.
So I think that is a perfectly that's a great way. That's a perfectly reasonable way to change your story, tweak your story. Again, in my slides, I mentioned not changing your product, not changing your story too much. It's okay to tweak it a little bit, right? But depending on which markets you're going in, you'll find typically, right, it might be different for your product, but typically if you're selling on quality, that's very different from selling on price. And if you are able to sell on quality in one market, it'll be harder for you to sell on something completely different in a different market. But it could be possible. So I actually launched a product a few years back. I was working at a startup and I launched a product in US market. We were selling it for for about $10. And then we went to a market like India, and we found out a comparable product was being sold for like 50 cents. And it completely broke our model, right? But we were in US, we were selling on quality and premium service, and now we had to go in and sell at 50 cents. But we changed our value proposition, just like you were talking about, and we decided to make money on volumes. Right? It was no additional cost for us to produce that service or change that service for that market. Some additional cost, it was a software product, SaaS product, so some additional cost in terms of AWS and cloud service. But yeah, that's perfectly legitimate approach. But the only thing you have to be careful about is, if you spread in too many different directions and too many different value propositions, maybe you need to really think about which countries, like if those countries are really worth the pain or the complexity that you want to introduce in your business. And maybe they are huge markets, and maybe it is the right time and right market to go after. And if that's the case, yeah, go for it.
Do you think that setting... Oh yeah, sorry.
I was going to add a point here. Adhar, thank you for your presentation. I appreciate the cogency and the clarity and the deep insight in your comments that surround it. And my comment here, and I don't want to take up too much time, we're running over, reflects a bias of the environment in which I've been working, and that's striving from concept to scale digital health innovation, particularly with the framework of policy that supports new modes of care delivery through connected care technologies. And I believe that in general, my comment is highly applicable to the US healthcare industry, which is the most highly regulated industry in the United States, and maybe so in other countries as well. And to varying degrees, from very little to very much, is applicable to any startup. And that is the question, to me, it's worthy of a slide in its own, the potential burdens of compliance with policy and regulation. So to speak specifically of digital healthcare, and this is applicable to ViewMind, is your project, your product, your solution potentially subject to policies such as HIPAA, the policies governing the security and privacy of patient health information, FDA approvals? And in fact, if you're impacting care delivery, are there supportive policies in terms of ICD and CPT code pairings such that that mode of care delivery is reimbursable, absent of which the product cannot be viable in the healthcare industry? Now, in the case of digital health, highly applicable, maybe less so in the energy industry and so forth. But I do believe a general, as part of the MVP process and validation of that, are there applicable compliance requirements in terms of policy and regulation that impact the viability of your product in a particular market? And I think it is worthy of a bullet point, at least on thinking about a market, and definitely in the area of healthcare.
Yeah, definitely. I think regulation is an important part of viability. So great points.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you again, Adhar. Really, really appreciate it. Again, if you guys need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, thank you, Kirin. Thanks, everybody. And I'm available if there's any questions after the fact. Kirin, please feel free to share my information, and happy to answer any questions or have follow-ups.
Will do. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.